Good morning, everyone. This is Laura Clinch from Recology, and she is going to be speaking about the recycling program we have at Horizon House and in Seattle. I think it's going to be pretty important information, and this is a good time for you to ask those questions. And by the way, I'm Barbara. I work in environmental services, if you do not know me. So if you need to stop in the hall and have a complaint, you know who to call. You know to stop. Okay, thank you. And here's Laura.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Can you all hear me well enough? Let me know. My voice tends to be a little soft, so yeah, don't hesitate to tell me to speak up. But I work for Recology. I'm on the Waste Zero team. I'm a Waste Zero specialist, so I work with, specifically for the most part, multifamily properties in Seattle at the properties that we serve. Seattle has kind of a dual contract with us and WM. So we service some of Seattle, WM services some of Seattle, but all of the rules throughout the city are the same for what we can recycle. But this is one of our trucks. This is one of our electric trucks. We have a few that service Seattle. These trucks also service Issaquah, but we're working on getting more and more so that we can move away from our natural gas powered trucks, move more towards the electric trucks. But we are a service provider we started in San Francisco, so that's where our headquarters are, and we service over 130 communities up and down the West Coast. We started servicing Seattle just about 10 years ago. We took over what was called Cleanscapes. So that's just a little bit about us here in Seattle. But our mission overall as a company is to divert material from the landfill. So we try to do everything we can to send as little material to the landfill as possible. And one of those ways is through education. And we also incentivize recycling. So recycling is free in most of our cities that we serve. And so your trash bill is going to be more expensive than your recycling and compost bill. So that's one of the ways that we kind of incentivize recycling. But we'll go to a property and we will assess how much waste they're producing, what they're putting in the trash, recycle, compost, and we will try to right size their bins so that they're getting proper service for all three streams. So this one, for example, was a nursery. So we went there and we saw that they had a pretty large garbage container and a smaller recycle and compost. So we did some education, taught them what they can actually put in each bin, and then they were able to downsize their garbage service and increase their recycle and compost service. So that's kind of generally what I do on a day-to-day basis. And then, of course, it helps the environment and it also helps your wallet. So this is just a little bit about what we're sort of up against in the recycling industry. So manufacturers often are kind of looking for convenience for the consumers often. So an example of that would be these oranges were being sold at Whole Foods. You can see that, the peel was removed and they were put in a plastic container, but they got some pushback from customers. Saying, why do we need these oranges in a plastic container? They already have a peel that, protects them. So, Whole Foods got called out by the consumers and then they removed that from the shelves and they went back to just, regular oranges. But that's just a little bit of an example of plastic kind of taken over, and we do have a voice as consumers, so definitely speak up when it comes to that kind of thing, because you'd be surprised in what kind of changes you can make as a community. But the landfill, again, is another thing that we're up against. So landfill capacity, the one here in King County is set to close or be at capacity around 2040. So that's pretty soon. So it's one of the reasons why we want to reduce the material going to the landfill, just so that, you know, we don't have to create more and more landfills. And you might kind of think that, oh, just because I'm putting something in the landfill or in the garbage, that doesn't mean that it's just going to completely go to waste, because it'll break down over time. But in reality, even these carrots here, they were uncovered from a landfill that had been closed 10 years prior. So they uncovered the landfill and they found these carrots that had really not broken down at all. So just a little bit of an example of why we should really be composting and recycling as much as we can. Don't want to just toss things in the garbage hoping that they're gonna break down over time. And just another example of why we want to recycle as much as we can is that all of Seattle's garbage actually goes, it gets sent on a train down to Arlington, Oregon. So a train goes down there twice a day. And that, you know, that's a pretty far distance for all of our garbage to be traveling, uses a lot of fossil fuels to get down there. And yeah, it's just an example of how much garbage Seattle is producing. We produce so much garbage that there is no landfill in Washington that will accept our garbage. So that's why we have to send it to Oregon. Why do they take it? So there's a contract that the city of Seattle has with that landfill to take the garbage there, because it's a bigger landfill. So they have more capacity than the landfill here in Washington, where most of the rest of King County's garbage goes. Does that answer your question? Right. Yeah. So a lot of, you know, recycling, trash, the whole industry has to do with what infrastructure is available in a certain area. So there just simply isn't enough of that, you know, landfill infrastructure in Washington to hold our garbage. And, you know, there's a lot of course, regulations about where a landfill can be, where there's room for one, and right now there just isn't room for Seattle's garbage in Washington. Yeah, there's a lot of landfills all over the city of Seattle, actually, that you might not know used to be a landfill. But yeah, you might be walking on old garbage and not even know it. But we do want to reduce that, of course, as much as possible. So moving right along to what we can recycle. So this is kind of generally what we want to see being put in the recycle and what we want to see showing up at our sorting facility. So we've got glass. That really consists of glass jars and glass bottles. Serviceware glass, like a wine glass. Or, you know, like a water glass, drinking glass, has a different melting point than a glass jar or glass bottle. So those would actually be garbage if they broke, for example. But we do want to put glass jars and glass bottles in the recycle. I'll go over that later on. And then we have rigid plastics. So any plastic that, like if you just put it in your hand, it holds its shape. So no flimsy plastic, no film plastic, but rigid plastic is great. And you don't really have to pay attention to the number in the triangle because that can get really confusing. So just, you know, if it's clean and dry and it's rigid, then that is great to put in the recycle. The thinnest type of plastic that we want going in the recycle would be like a water bottle or like a fruit container, clamshell, like that clear, thin plastic. That's just about like the thinnest that we'll accept. Yeah, I'll go over that as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question about the clean and dry?
Yeah.
How dry is dry?
I'll go over that as well.
Okay,
Yeah. So Cardboard is another great example of what we want to put in the recycle. If you're able to, it's great to remove the tape and stickers if there's an excess amount, but it's not required to remove all of the tape and stickers. And then we have metals, so this includes a lot of tin, so tin cans, and then also aluminum. Aluminum cans. Some of the cans are made out of tin and some of them are made out of aluminum, but we accept both. And aluminum foil is one that kind of surprises folks. You can roll it up into a ball about the size of your fist, and then that's perfectly recyclable as long as it's not, excessively food soiled. And then envelopes. So that's a great item to recycle. There have been a lot of questions about those plastic windows. And technically at Recology's facility, we do not want to see those plastic windows show up. But the thing about multifamily properties in Seattle is that all of the recycling from here at Horizon House or any other multifamily property actually gets sent to a different facility. Pretty much the same process. They accept most of the same materials, but they actually do accept those plastic windows. And it's not necessarily because they're able to recycle them, but it's just because they accept that kind of amount of contamination within that paper envelope. So it is best practice to remove the window, put the window in the garbage, and recycle the envelope without the window, but you are allowed to leave the window on. And then some other paper products, brown paper bag is great as long as it's clean, printer paper, newspaper, magazines. Tetra Pak containers are technically considered a paper product that we send to one of our paper recyclers. So that would be like that Almond Breeze container or like a protein shake bottle or like a broth carton similar to the one on the screen here. You do want to remove the cap, but the plastic spout you can leave on there. And you will probably notice that it is a mixed material. There's like a plastic lining, but the paper recyclers that we work with are able to process that and separate that and then recycle the paper aspect of it. Yeah, what's your question? Great question. Yeah, so labels like that. The question is, do we have to remove labels from containers like a jar or a can or a bottle? And the answer is no. You don't have to remove that label. The recyclers have ways to remove it. And it is really hard to, fully remove it. So yeah, you can leave your can label, your, pasta jar label on there. That's totally fine. Any other questions before I move on? Okay. So really quickly, I want to highlight coffee cups because they can be really confusing. So a lot of the time, most of the time in Seattle at this point, they are compostable. So, if it says commercially compostable, you can compost that. But if it doesn't say commercially compostable, then it is probably recyclable. Typically, the standard coffee cups from Starbucks, those are recyclable. They just have to be empty. So as long as you fully finish your coffee or whatever beverage was in there, you can recycle that. But you do have to separate the lid, and the lid is recyclable as well. It just has to be separate. Yes, so do make sure that there is not an excess amount of like foam left over or any liquid. It has to be, completely empty. You don't have to rinse it out unless there is like a little bit of foam left in there. But as long as you're completely finishing your beverage, then it should be fine. Yes, I will talk about clean and dry, absolutely. Okay, another tricky one that it's my understanding that this comes up a lot here. So with your prescription bottles, Those orange ones, you know, anything that is like a prescription medication, those bottles are garbage, unfortunately. And that's because there's a high likelihood that there might be a little bit of medication left in there, or they're simply usually too small to be recycled, because everything that we put in the recycle has to be 3 inches or larger, unless it's like a broken glass jar, then that's fine. Yeah, so the prescription bottles are garbage, but over-the-counter medication bottles or supplement bottles, those are fine to go in the recycle as long as they're 3 inches by 3 inches or larger. So this vitamin C bottle is a good example of something that we can recycle. And again, you would want to separate the lid, because that's a plastic lid with like a glass bottle, it looks like. That lid is less than 3 inches, so that would have to be garbage. Any questions here?
I've seen someplace before that if the lid and the bottle are both plastic, it's okay to
Yes,
put it on the bottle.
this is true. Yeah, so if you have a water bottle or soda bottle, and it's the same material bottle as the cap, or you know, same material body as the cap or lid, then those should stay together. Yeah.
I read that they can be different materials, but the lids actually are more valuable than the bottles sometimes.
So in that case, I think what that would be referring to is like a water bottle is technically PET plastic, and then the lid might be HDPE, which is a different type of plastic. And it's fine to keep them together, but it is true that the HDPE type of plastic is more valuable than the PET plastic. But the plastic recyclers are able to separate that, those two different types of plastic, and then sell them that way. Yeah.
What about metal screw-on caps, say on wine bottles, metal and glass?
Yeah, so definitely you'd want to separate those, and then the question was about like a wine bottle with a metal screw-on cap, or like any glass bottle with a metal cap, maybe a beer bottle or something like that. You definitely want to separate those, and then that cap is garbage because it's less than 3 inches. Alternatively, with like the wine screw-on bottles, if you want to go above and beyond, you can kind of collect them over time and squish them up into a ball, and then they can be recycled that way as long as it reaches about the size of your fist or larger, similar to aluminum foil. But that's a lot of effort, and we don't necessarily, you know, expect everyone to do that. Okay. Yep. Yeah, because we want it to be 3 inches or larger. So the size of your fist is just about the right size. Yeah, if it's a plastic bottle with a plastic lid, you want to keep it together. So the question was just a follow-up question about the supplement bottles, about the caps. So they can be left on the bottle if it's the same material as the bottle. So plastic cap, plastic bottle, keep those together and recycle the whole thing.
They still need to be 3 inches?
The whole thing needs to be 3 inches, yeah, or larger. Yep.
Your slice is 3 by 3, so two dimensions have to be 3, and the other one can be less.
So I would say, I mean, it's kind of like you have to use your best judgment there. Like just generally 3 by 3, we want at least one of the dimensions to be 3 inches. Ideally 3 by 3 by 3 would, I guess, be the proper.
Tuna can is maybe 3 inches.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah, so like a tuna can, technically maybe that's not 3 inches tall, but we still accept that. It's the reason why everything has to be 3 by 3 inches is because at the beginning of our recycling, like our sorting process, all of the glass gets broken down and goes through a 3 by 3 grate. So anything less than 3 inches is going to land in our glass stream. So if you think about like a tuna can, it's probably not going to fall through that 3x3 grate. And in fact, like if you go to our facility for a tour, you'll see all the cans, they're getting collected. So yeah, it's like a little bit of, there's some leeway there, but yeah, 3x3x3 is a good way to go. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Laura, can I ask you a question
Mhm.
about the tuna can?
Mm-hmm.
So the ones, they have the flip top things. What do you want us to do with the flip top?
Good question. So if you have a can that, you know, you opened it with a can opener or it pops open, try to leave that lid part attached a little bit so that it can, we don't really want to put those lids loosely through the recycle because that's a safety concern, and they're also more likely to fall through the grate. So yeah, definitely leave the lid of the can attached a little bit. Don't like fully take it off. Mm-hmm.
I've seen a suggestion you partly crush the can with the lid inside it and probably use it down.
Yeah, that's an option. If you want, you can, if the lid does come off on accident, you can sort of crush the can a little bit so that the lid stays in there, but that can be a little bit dangerous. So definitely use caution and don't do that if you're concerned about maybe getting cut by the can or something. Say that again? Okay, yeah. Well, as long as you're wearing thick shoes, maybe that is fine. Yeah. Okay, some more common contaminants. So these are items that we do not want to put in the recycle. Plastic bags or plastic film of any kind. So any sort of plastic that you can roll up into a ball. You can't just like hold in your hand and it'll keep its shape. Those are going to be garbage, not recycle. So don't bag your recyclables. Put them loosely into the recycle. And then another common contaminant is small plastics. So plastic utensils, plastic straws. These are technically a recyclable material, but they are too small. They will end up in our glass stream and ultimately go to the landfill anyway.
We have chutes that the trash garbage goes into. Should we not put those in plastic bags? Should we put those
Okay.
in paper bags?
So if you do have recycling chutes, okay. Garbage should be bagged, but recycle shouldn't be bagged.
Plastic bags and garbage.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What about the plastic bags that say, compostable?
Yeah, so if a bag says commercially compostable, then that would be compost. You wouldn't, yeah. That wouldn't go in the recycle or the garbage, it would go in the compost. But yeah, pretty much everything here on the screen, this is gonna be garbage. You can see that food container, so that's just an example of, we really wanna make sure we're not putting any food waste in the recycle. And then that smoothie cup there, you can see that there's a little bit of smoothie left inside. We don't want that. We would want to rinse that out a bit. It's a bit too dirty to put in the recycle, and especially that liquid will cause problems with our paper and cardboard stream, getting them wet, and then, you know, they won't be able to be recycled at that point. Any sort of snack wrapper of any kind is going to be garbage as well. And then gloves, you know, this is more common like back of house at a restaurant or something. But gloves are garbage, not recycle, even though they're usually blue. Okay, so empty, clean, and dry. It's kind of our mantra. So we really want to make sure that all bottles and containers are empty. And if they have some food residue left in them or like smoothie residue or something like that, really want to make sure we're rinsing them out a little bit and then completely emptying out that water, making sure there's no liquid or food that's going to spill onto all the other materials in the recycle bin. On the right side there, that's an example of, so the blue section is great, it's clean enough to be recycled, but those dirty ones, let's say you're like out and about, you don't really have the means to wipe it out, rinse it out. So if it's that dirty, we would prefer you just put that in the garbage. We don't want to put that amount of food soiled material in the recycle.
In your recyclable section, you have a clamshell kind of thing, but I thought those were always plastic or some sort.
Yeah, so the clamshell that you see there, that is it's made out of plastic, that one. It's not styrofoam. Plastic clamshells are totally fine to be recycled as long as they're empty, clean, and dry. The exception to that would be if it said commercially compostable on it, then it would of course be compost.
And you could leave food in compost.
Yes.
What about, I had something yesterday that I washed, but in the seams, there was a little bit of residual.
If it's just a little bit, that's fine. It doesn't have to be like clean enough to where you'd want to eat off of it. But yeah, just kind of, we want to make sure that things aren't spilling out onto our paper and cardboard is the main goal.
So let me ask about dry. You mean not wet and water sloshing around, but if there's a few drops of water because you couldn't get it all out, that's okay?
Correct, yeah. So the question was, how dry does it have to be? Again, we just want to make sure that nothing is able to spill out or, leak out. If there's just a few drops on the sides of the bottle, that's totally fine. If you want to, you could leave it out overnight to let it dry, but that's not necessarily, you don't really have to do that. Yeah, just like I said, the main goal is so that we don't get any liquid or food waste on our paper or cardboard. Okay, so I understand that shredded paper has been a big topic recently. So I know that you all sometimes have a paper shredding company come by and you can put all your sensitive documents or whatever that you want shredded. You can put it in that bin, and then the goal would be for that shredded paper to be recycled in a special way other than in our mixed recycling. However, we're not exactly sure about the integrity of that recycling program. So what we recommend doing instead is redacting information. So blacking out any sort of sensitive info, covering it with a stamp or something like that, and then leaving the paper whole, and then recycling it in the regular mixed recycle. That way we can ensure that that paper will get recycled. Of course, if you don't want to put in the effort to redact info that way, then paper shredding companies are an alternative that you can use. But another kind of important thing is that we don't want any shredded paper going into our mixed recycling, right? Because it's less than 3 inches, it'll end up in our glass stream, it causes a whole mess at our facility. So we really want to make sure that we're not putting any shredded paper into the recycle. But yeah, does anyone have any questions about redacting instead of shredding?
So we have bins all over the place where you put your stuff in, the little filling actually. And that company will take care of it, is that right?
So that's what we're not really sure about. And of course, I'm not affiliated with those companies. We're not really sure that they're actually able to recycle all the material, partly because there is so much contamination that ends up in there because of plastic windows in the envelopes, or a credit card or something like that. So it is pretty difficult to recycle shredded paper. So that's why it is better practice to just redact info, keep the sheet of paper whole and recycle it in the regular mixed recycling. Okay, just another reminder to put things loosely into the recycle. Don't bag them because, of course, we don't want plastic bags in the recycle, especially black plastic bags. So if we see a plastic bag, a black plastic bag that we can't see through at our facility, we will just assume it's garbage because we don't have time to go through every bag and make sure that everything in there is recyclable. So yeah, if you want to bag your recyclables, you can use a paper bag. That's totally fine. Just no plastic bags. This photo here is why we don't want plastic bags in the recycle. So this is an image from our facility, and one of the steps is these spindles. So there's rows of spindles that all the material gets sent over, and then the paper, more flat, lighter materials like cardboard, paper, things like that will float over the spindles, and then the smaller, heavier container type items will fall through the spindles. But if plastic bags go through there, they'll get all wound up in the spindles, and then that mechanism won't work properly. And then liquids and food waste, just, you know, we want everything to be empty, clean, and dry, because food waste and liquids, when that gets on the paper or the cardboard, that often causes it to mold. And then that's not only a health concern at our facility, but also makes it so that that paper and cardboard can no longer be recycled because the fibers get broken down and they can't be turned into new paper or cardboard. Okay, so this is an example of where your recycling goes. So this is our facility. The recycling from Horizon House, like I said earlier, gets sent to a different facility, but it's very similar processes. But this is kind of what it looks like. We call it our big green machine, but it's technically called a MRF, or a material recovery facility. And here's what it looks like, kind of when it shows up. It can look like a mess, but then you'd be surprised by the end of it, after it gets sorted out by all the people who work there, and also the different mechanisms, machines, and technology that sorts out material. You can see that those bales there, those cubes, that's kind of our final product. That specifically is our paper bales, but they, you know, by the end of it, they have less than 5% contamination within them. So the facility really does a great job at separating all of those different materials. And that's why we can have a commingled recycling or a mixed recycling bin. And that's why it's more convenient for us, because the machine is able to separate everything for us. So generally what happens is, you know, you'll put your recyclables in your recycle bin. We'll pick it up, we'll take it to our facility or a different facility. It'll all get sorted out, and then we bale the material up, depending on which type of material it is, and then we'll send it off to different recyclers that we heavily vet and do visits and tours, and make sure that we can trust them, that they're actually recycling the material. We have like long-standing relationships with a lot of recyclers that we trust, and the only thing that we send overseas is paper and cardboard. We don't send any plastic overseas. Everything else stays within North America. So these items are what we call special items, and you can't put these in your regular recycle bin, but there are ways to recycle them. One of those ways being the Recology store, if you've ever heard of that. We have 4 of them. We're opening more currently, but we have one in Shoreline, Bothell, Issaquah, and Burien. And you can bring a lot of these materials to the Recology stores. Also, other facilities take some of these materials as well. But this way that they're actually being recycled instead of sent to the landfill or, you know, polluting. Big one is fluorescent light bulbs, of course. They they're very toxic, so we don't want to put them in any of the bins, to break and cause health concerns. But they can be brought to hazardous waste facilities, the Recology store, transfer stations, and then that mercury gets recycled. And, vegetable oil, after you maybe like fry some chicken, you can collect that oil and bring it to the Recology store, or you can set up a special pickup of the vegetable oil. Styrofoam is a really big one. So not only do we want to keep that out of the recycle, but we also like to keep it out of the trash because it can be recycled and also takes up a lot of space in the bin. So Styro Recycle is the company around here that does most of the styrofoam recycling, and they turn the recycled styrofoam into all sorts of different things like picture frames or crown molding.
Just for residents who may not know, primarily all of those things can be taken to our B3 level, where there is an electronic waste bin. There's also Thread Cycle for anything that cannot be donated to Monday Market or Goodwill. That's on B3. Also down there is a place to put the batteries and light bulbs. So these things can be taken to B3 for recycling.
Yeah, and if you have any questions about a certain item, whether you can get it recycled here at Horizon House, just ask, and I'm sure someone can help you with disposing of that properly. Yeah, batteries are a really big one. There recently a law passed where we're not allowed to put batteries in the garbage anymore because it does cause fires often in our trucks and at the landfill, of course. So yeah, make sure we're not putting any batteries in the garbage. We want to recycle those properly. Small appliances, electronics, those are also things that can get recycled here, it sounds like, which is awesome. And then, yeah, it is super important to recycle your textiles. Maybe you have some old socks that you can't donate, they have holes in them, but they can still be recycled. So definitely utilize that Thread Cycle resource. So the bike, we accept bikes and bike parts at the Recology store. I believe a lot of transfer stations take them as well, but we partner with a company here in Seattle that refurbishes bikes and donates them and sells them for pretty cheap, and it's a really awesome company. It's called Bike Works. You can also just donate straight to them. So those ones, B3, yeah, take those to B3. Can take like larger electronics like TVs and things. Computers. Okay, so this is just a really great resource that is provided by Seattle Public Utilities. So on their website, they have this "Where Does It Go" tool, and you can type in anything that you have that you're not sure how to dispose of it properly, and it's really awesome. It just pops right up like wherever you should bring it or which bin you should put it in. So I recommend using that. You can just Google Seattle, "Where Does It Go?" and this search engine will pop up. All right, so that's everything that I have. Thank you so much for listening and learning. Happy to take any and all questions, concerns at this point.
The supermarkets have plastic bags, and I see people that put one potato in a plastic bag and one banana in the other one. Can they control that? Can the city do something so that those plastic bags are not available that way?
So, I mean, what they are doing, they charge for the bags, and that's all that's really happening right now is, you get charged a few cents for the bags. There are, there's a possibility that the plastic bags could get banned altogether. and that would be great. But yeah, that's all I know right now. Yeah.
I have a question about tea bags. There was a little article in our alert a few weeks ago that only Bigelow tea bags can be fully put into the food recycling. So for all other tea bags, that can the commercial composting not handle those tea bags and we have to empty the tea out?
So I will say, I'm not sure how many of you were here for the Cedar Grove presentation with Sierra, but she probably went over the tea bags. It's pretty tricky. Technically, Cedar Grove doesn't really want tea bags just because it's confusing which ones are compostable, which ones aren't. To my understanding, it's okay as long as it's a fully paper bag and you remove the string and the label and if there's a staple, you have to remove that. So generally we recommend just putting them in the garbage because it can cause a lot of contamination at the composting facility. But if you are absolutely certain that it's just a paper tea bag and you remove the string and the staple and everything, then it should be okay. But yeah, definitely use your best judgment and kind of, try your best not to put any like plastic or anything like that in the compost.
What about pets that die?
So that's a good question. So that would be neither of the bins. So you wouldn't want to put that in the garbage, recycle, or the compost. And I don't know like where exactly you're supposed to bring that if you're not like bringing it to the vet and having it cremated and whatnot. It's a good question, but yeah, we don't want to put those in any of the bins.
I'll answer this really quickly. Okay, so you cannot dispose of a large animal, and a cat is a large animal, okay? At Horizon House, you need to call a vet. You need to get them picked up. You need to deliver them to the vet. That's just, we can't dispose of animals. Thank you very much. Because it is a health reason. It's safety reasons. And if you were anywhere in Seattle, you wouldn't be able to dispose of, people do bury their animals. We don't have that kind of land here. But you cannot dispose of an animal in Seattle in the waste disposal.
Thank you.
I don't know anything about goldfish.
Yeah, goldfish is a tricky one. Yeah, not down the toilet. Yeah, because, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you.